This is Sarah Jones for Politicus Radio. Joining me this evening is our editor-in-chief, Jason Easley, to talk about Republicans overplaying their hand with the Netanyahu Speech invite. How are you doing tonight, Mr. Easley?
I'm fine, Miss Jones. How are you?
Good. I really want to get into this because it seems like what we're seeing here is another Republican overreach, and I want to see if that's your impression as well. Republicans are hoping to turn Boehner's invitation to Netanyahu into a campaign issue against Democrats, with Sheldon Adelson promising to spend millions to use the Democratic revolt against them in the next campaign. How effective do you think Republicans will be in turning Democratic revolt against them, and should Democrats worry about this threat?
Let me go backwards. Democrats shouldn't be worried at all. First of all. Secondly, there's just no reason to worry. President Obama won 78% of the vote, Jewish vote in 2008, 69% in 2012. In a terrible year for Democrats, they won 60% of the Jewish votes in last year's midterm election. The Jewish voters, this is going to come as a surprise to Republicans, but you can't treat voters like they're stupid. They're treating Jewish voters like they treat African American voters, like they treat Hispanic voters, like they treat women voters. You can't. They're trying to gin up something to divide and peel away a segment of the electorate, and people aren't stupid. It's not going to work. I don't know. I wouldn't call this overreach. I would call this sort of a disaster in the making, another self-inflicted wound, because they set out to created, just like they did with the fiscal cliff fiasco and the debt downgrade and everything else, they set out to create these conflicts that they hope they can game for political advantage. But what happens every time is the conflict backfires on them, and they end up taking the brunt of the blame when things go wrong.
Did you hear that today? They're trying to blame Democrats for Republicans refusing to fund the Department of Homeland Security as the clock tick-tock goes down to that.
Yes, that's one that Mitch McConnell first brought up on the Senate floor last week, was, Democrats are blocking Homeland Security funding, and we won't mention anything about that little part where we undo Obama's immigration executive orders.
And where they didn't fund it yet. I mean, it's the only agency they've left unfunded. So how is that the Democrats' fault?
Well, it's the Democrats' fault, because if they would just undo Obama's immigration executive orders, we could have funding for Homeland Security.
So, in other words, Republicans are using what little authority they have in terms of the budget to mitigate, negate, and actually redo an election. They don't want an election for the president. They want to determine, well, he won the election, but he doesn't get to be president.
This is part of McConnell's "we're going to bend Obama to our will," breaking the president kind of mentality, that they think that if they just gather up enough hostages, they're gonna be able to just make Obama carry out their agenda.
Well, Republicans are threatening to do this whole campaign against Democrats, and they're going to call them, and they already have, anti-patriotic, anti-American, some of them even going through you have contempt for Israel, so you're not American. How can Democrats counter this narrative?
Ignore it.
But really? Because it's going to be effective with a certain portion of the electorate.
It's not going to be effective. Ignore it. It's a fake issue. By discussing the issue, they give the issue credibility. What they need to do is simply discuss what really happened here, which is the disrespect of the president by avoiding protocol, and shoot this and basically expose this as a partisan game. Right now, we have two messages. The Republicans are trying to cover their tracks on this by claiming this is a disrespect of Israel. And the Democrats rightly have been using the facts that this has nothing to do with Israel, and this is all just a partisan play.
I thought the president made a really good point about distinguishing between, right now, what Netanyahu and Ambassador Ron Dermer are doing is really setting this up so that it's the only communication will be between the right wing in Israel and the right wing in America. But this doesn't seem like the smartest move for Israel.
It's not the smartest move for Israel. It's not even the smartest move for Netanyahu, actually. I mean, this whole... I understand that they were being fed information by Boehner's office of what they expected the political landscape to be after the midterm election. What the landscape in reality is quite different, and now they find themselves, and so a lot of people will be able to identify this, they find themselves caught in a disaster of John Boehner and their own making, because it could have very easily been avoided. All Netanyahu's people had to do was pick up the phone and say, hey, we're coming and we would like to talk to you and to Congress. That's it.
Right, and Republicans are acting like, there was no breach of protocol. Excuse me, I've had a cough for weeks. There was no breach of protocol, and Netanyahu didn't know. But of course, that's ridiculous. There are standards. Everyone else has managed to do things according to protocol, and he isn't a moron, and this isn't his first rodeo.
Of course Netanyahu knew, because Netanyahu has not apologized for the breach in protocol. If this was a mistake, the first thing the Israeli officials would have done would have been to apologize directly.
So my question is, should Democrats attend the speech?
I think that's up to each Democrat. I think the reality is the White House is handling this perfectly, because Republicans are trying to set up this dynamic where it's a proxy war between Obama and Netanyahu. But really, this is a war between Obama and conservatives. So the administration so far's position has been, hey, we're not going to tell you not to go to the speech, but we're not going to have anything to do with it. That's probably the best way to handle it, because I think Democrats can make their own decisions depending on what district you're in, what state you're in, and depending on how they feel about it. I know the leadership is probably going to go. Pelosi's already signaled she's going to go. Reid's already said Netanyahu called him about it beforehand, so he's going to go. What I believe is going to happen is you're going to see the liberal caucuses, and that's a big, strong sway in the Democratic Congressional Caucus period now, with the thinning ranks, with all the red staters having been dumped in 2014. You're going to see those people. The pressure isn't going to come from outside not to attend this speech. It's not going to come from the activists and the online petitions. It's going to come from Democrats within the caucus. When you get to 24 Democrats not showing up and 36 Democrats not showing up, that's going to be a lot of empty seats. Like right now, we're at about a dozen.
Okay, and what you're saying makes perfect, it's good political strategy, but on the other hand, let's look at just for a moment how this is going to impact the base, because I'm seeing a lot of anger about this, and frankly, I personally feel really offended by what's gone on with this invite, and it isn't the partisan part of it that offends me. Even if this was President Bush, and I didn't agree with much of what he did, I would be really offended by a foreign power thinking that they can come in and dictate our foreign policy, and especially while we're in talks with Iran over, trying to work on nuclear disarmament, which impacts the entire world. This is not a time for petty games, and I'm really offended by that. I mean, I really find this on a personal level offensive, and I don't know at this point how I feel about Democrats who attend the speech. And I'm assuming, because I'm seeing it on my Facebook page and on Twitter, that there's a lot of agreement in that. So, how do Democrats avoid the mistakes of 20...
But the worst thing they could possibly do was have some kind of top-down strategy telling their people not to attend.
Well, I agree with that, and I'm not suggesting that they should do that. But what I am talking about is these individual Democrats, and I understand the folks in red states and all of that, but I don't want to see a repeat of 2014. And what we have happen all the time is that when Democrats don't have spine, the base gets, they don't want to come out to vote. And I know 2016 hopefully we'll have some strong Democrat at the top of the ticket, and so that's not going to be a problem.
It's not going. Hillary Clinton's going to be there. It's not going to be a problem. I think that anybody who tries to divide the Democratic Party over this is playing into Republican hands. Because remember, part of the goal here is to humiliate Obama and split the Democratic caucus. That's the goal. Those are the Republican goals.
But how do you think this can be used against Republicans? And do you think that Speaker John Boehner miscalculated?
Oh, Boehner completely got it wrong again. And Republicans are doing the job for themselves as far as how it's used against them. Democrats shouldn't actually do anything because, remember, this is a fake issue. Anything you do to feed the issue is going to help the Republican cause. I think this is blowing up perfectly. I mean, you have the Israelis and Boehner both frantically trying to just find a way out of this.
And you see Republicans really gloating over this and thinking that they are in the driver's seat, but I'm reading a lot of even Jewish pundits that are really taken aback and not pleased with this situation. And I can imagine, anytime you have a cause that is important to you, you don't want to see it mishandled. And I think that the United States has been such a strong ally, and certainly President Obama has been, the biggest supporter of Israel in terms of aid of any president. And so what you're seeing now is they're basically biting the hand that feeds them.
Yeah, I think this is all just so ugly and so rotten that basically we've seen Democrats and Obama and Democrats have become masters of giving Republicans enough rope to hang themselves with. That's what's happening here. Republicans are doing this all themselves. And now by fighting back and forth, Democrats just are kind of stepping aside and going, you know what? I can't be a part of this. Those that are boycotting. Tentatively, like a dozen have come out for the boycott. The estimate is you could see as many as 3 dozen. 3 dozen have gone on record expressing reservations about attending the speech. When you start getting up to dozens and dozens and dozens of empty seats on the Democratic side, the room starts to look kind of empty, which is why Netanyahu, they're seriously worried about Democrats totally pulling out of this, which is why they're now talking about in Israel making this a closed-door speech where there's no television cameras.
Well, it would be nice to see, and I'm speaking purely not as a strategist, but as a person watching this go down, as a voter. It would be really nice to see Democrats have some spine. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that the majority of them are going to stay home. But it would be really nice for once, because honestly, I am, and I think I know I speak for many people when I say this, I'm really fed up with the disrespect of this president. And there's no basis for it. And it's gotten to the point where, as much as I understand the political strategies and I support them, because I want to win elections and I don't want crazy corporate Koch brother nut jobs running the country. But on the other hand, there's that human side that says just kick him in the nuts once.
But the dynamic that's already working here is doing exactly that without distracting from the real issue. The Democrats should be standing up, and there should be even more of them, and saying we will not tolerate this disrespect to the president. And that's all they should say. They don't have to get into supporting Israel, not supporting Israel, attending the speech, not attending the speech. If the pressure is getting really intense right now on Boehner and Netanyahu.
I like what you just said, and let's just reiterate it for a moment. I don't want you to forget what you were going to say, but I think that's really important, that if Democrats would just keep repeating the message that they're not going to stand for this disrespect of the president, I think that would accomplish a lot about helping the base feel better about this, while at the same time, as you're pointing out, not buying into...
I think the base feels pretty good about this. I mean, right now, the way things are going
They don't want the Democrats to go to this speech.
With Democrats standing up. And the speech doesn't matter. The speech, that's what people need to miss. The speech is completely irrelevant. This is all a big sham. So the important part is, and this has been building for years, Democrats come out and say, we will not tolerate this disrespect.
Well, let's hope that they do that, because honestly, if the shoe were on the other foot, if this was President Bush, you can bet that it would never have gotten this far. And I know that bothers people. And honestly, if you don't stand up for things and if you don't demand respect, at some point people stop respecting you. And I think that's the other dangerous part, that Democrats often fall into that hole. And I hope they take this opportunity to do something differently.
I suspect that the pressure, the House, you've seen House Democrats react more strongly to this because they're up for re-election next year. Most of the senators in the Democratic caucus, remember, the map is 24-10 Republicans on defense. There's only 10 Democrats up for re-election in 2016 in the Senate. They don't care. This is going to long blow over. Probably a week after Netanyahu gives his speech, no one will care anymore. They don't care. The people in the House Democrats, they care. Because for them, this could still be a very viable issue. And I think this disrespect now that the caucus is more liberal. And it's honestly, it's more liberal, and honestly, it's more female, and it's blacker. It's darker. It's not a white dominated caucus to such a degree anymore. That's changing things. Those people have been disrespected by the Republican Party, meaning everybody that's not a white male conservative since President Obama took office. And I think the disrespect is felt more personally by somebody who's also under attack by this agenda. When they see the president disrespected, that's a straight disrespect of them as an individual.
And that makes perfect sense to me. But I also go back to my other point about this isn't just about our president, and this isn't just about the disrespect being shown to President Obama. This is a global issue. This is about nuclear disarmament, and it is ridiculous to have Republicans screwing up the attempt to negotiate these talks. In fact, today I just saw the Iranian media gloating over the fact that Netanyahu and Boehner are disrespecting this president in the middle of these talks. I mean, that to me is now you're really meddling with something. This is completely inappropriate. It's beyond inappropriate. I'm not sure where to even take that. It's just unacceptable.
And that's Netanyahu's goal. Netanyahu does not want to deal with Iran. He does not want an arms deal with Iran.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying is he's getting what he wants to some degree and that's exactly why he's doing this, whether he does the speech or not. And I know he's going to do it. But even if he didn't do it at this point, he's still getting what he wants by egging Iran on to think, oh, look, the president has no power. So in these negotiations, we don't have to give.
Yeah, I think though the domestic politics angle, basically that's been building for a long, long time. And the reason why Democrats are so outraged is because, you know what, this is not the first time this has happened. It's not the second time. It's not the third time. It's not the 100th time. And I think finally there's a point now with Democrats not having to defend a majority in the House or the Senate where they can just say enough is enough.
Lately, Democrats, since the new Congress, sent out a few emails about how they are working on messaging and working on being better at basically their PR. In what way do you see that impacting this issue, or is it impacting this issue at all? Do you see a change
in the Democratic messaging?
Yeah.
No. I think the messaging's pretty much the same, and the fact that they've handled this really well. Instead of again, you don't want to feed this issue. You don't want to feed this fake crisis, this conflict that Republicans are desperately trying to create. So I think Democrats are of enough like mind on their own now that there's not an internal dispute or division. I mean, some of them are going to attend the speech because they see it as a big old photo op and they can be on the international stage and, a joint session of Congress, big deal. Some of them are going to be self-centered and they're going to do what they want to do. But I think the idea that enough of these members now don't have to be told. They don't have to be told by the people in general. We finally have a caucus that's more in step with the rank and file Democrats. It's my feeling.
Oh, okay. So you think that the rank and file Democrats are a little more liberal than the caucus has been in the past?
Oh yeah, I mean with the red staters and the moderates, it was definitely not as liberal as the way the party's been moving since 2012 at least.
But is it good for the party to move in a liberal direction when you want to capture that middle?
I think that's an interesting balancing act for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, she's definitely got a lot of, yeah.
naturally moderate that she has to be careful that the rank and file of the party don't desert her, or at least go sit on their hands.
I mean, what I'm saying is you don't want to see Democrats go down the road that Republicans have in terms of becoming so extremist that they alienate the middle and can't get...
See, but that's interesting. See, Democrats have taken an entirely different path. Their move left is always paralleled by what is popular in the country. When they move left on immigration, that's popular. Gay marriage, popular.
They're doing it the way it's supposed to be done, according to the...
They're listening to which direction the country wants to go in, and then saying...
They let the people dictate the policy, basically.
Here are the areas where we can go left. We have room on this, and we want to be in step with where the American people are. Mm-hmm. And whereas the Republicans just move left and try to impose the agenda.
Move right.
Or move right and try to impose the agenda. Mm-hmm. That's the difference in the behavior of the two parties.
And the Republicans go in a direction that's actually disingenuous. And I think that's where they trip up a lot, because they use these social issues as cover for tax credits for the rich, basically. Mm-hmm. They use the social issues to get the voters out and to disguise their real agenda. I mean, let's name one thing that they've done since they got in power that hasn't been a tax credit for the rich or some bizarre attempt to take away rights from a segment of the population.
Oh, there isn't. Oh, there have been a few things, but they were already on board. The veteran suicide bill, the terrorism insurance bill, but those are all things that would have passed in the last Congress that were held over just so this Congress could pass them.
And they also are very bipartisan. I mean, there isn't a lot of disagreement over those. You're not talking about anything ideological, basically. Mm-hmm. You might be in terms of how you implement things, but you're not talking about that in terms of the way those bills were written or what they stand for. Those are bipartisan issues.
Yeah, I mean, and there's nothing in the Republican agenda, and that's what people don't get. There's nothing that's been passed in the Republican agenda so far that would survive a presidential veto.
So they're just it's what they've done. It's Groundhog Day. They just keep wasting time redoing.
So the Netanyahu speech, is, again, another way of looking at this is it's another Boehner-created distraction issue.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I see this.
But also, I've had a sense from the very beginning that Obama was gaining too much momentum, and they thought they could derail Obama with this speech politically. And in fact, the exact opposite's happened. It's empowered the president even more, and it's brought Democrats, as they were warned about when they first did this, don't force Democrats to choose between Netanyahu and Obama, because they're going to choose Obama, and that's what's happened. So, I mean, this is all good for Democrats. I mean, the speech itself, I'm assuming that if a few more Democrats, like some high-profile Democrats, if you get another dozen or two House Democrats say they're not going to go to this thing, I'm assuming they're going to make it a closed-door speech in order to save face. If it starts looking too partisan, like it's going to be just a Republican conservative gathering, then all the impetus for what they wanted to achieve out of this, both Boehner and Netanyahu, will be gone. And in order to save face, they'll just make it a closed-door speech out of prime time, and that will be that.
I see what looks like a lot of delusion in Republicans. How do you explain that?
Because, well, that's neat.
How do you like that? I put you on the spot there.
They're out of touch with reality. And there's a lot of debate in political science circles about why that is. It's pretty much at least a threefold process. You have Republicans that only listen to their own media. They've created their own media. They have created their own schooling system and their own textbooks. So they have their own knowledge system, which is reinforced by their own media. And then there's gerrymandering, which has created their own districts. So they've created their own little universe within the country that they don't really have to go out of. And in that universe is very, very, very different from the rest of the majority of the country. So they are out of touch with reality, and they are delusional. And if they think that Jewish voters are going to suddenly flock to vote for Jeb Bush in 2016 because of this, they're sorely mistaken.
Did you see what Jeb Bush did today? He hired a technical.
Aren't you going to be publishing?
I am.
Yeah.
He hired a techie who has tweets out about how female art majors are sluts, but female science majors are ugly sluts. And also he's very annoyed by gay people at the gym who come on to him, so he burps to make sure they know that he isn't gay.
So this gentleman is quite possibly a closeted homosexual with mother issues.
He is perfect for the Republican Party.
Yes.
He hates women, clearly can't get a woman, and so has a lot of hostility. And part of that hostility he aims at gay people, because I think that that's just, any person they can put down. You see there's a lot of insecurity. And
well, any guy who says, well, those gay guys are always hitting on me.
Right. Well, I mean, but see, as a woman, this is the kind of man, I know this kind of man from their, it hits on you, and then it's so obvious that it's like you're bringing nothing to the table. So in order to jack yourself up, you sit here and create all this hatred of other people.
Would you be referring to this as an inflated sense of white male entitlement?
I think it comes from huge insecurity, and I think it comes from not living up to the patriarchal ideals of masculinity, and this is sort of the result of that. They would never admit that, and they'll say, "Oh no, I'm blah blah, I'm so successful," but I don't see that. I mean, if you're successful and confident, you wouldn't behave this way. You don't need to put other people down. So there's no excuse for it, and this is sort of the behavior of frat boys hopefully at the oldest. I mean, you see this in junior high and high school, and you hope people grow out of it. But anyway, so you haven't explained Republican delusion. You have tried to, but let's face it, they're over the edge. They're not coming back for a while.
It's what happens when you reject, when you no longer agree to the facts of anything.
Yes.
And you substitute belief.
Yes. And you see that all the time with them now, and it's really becoming almost funny the way that they counter something with their opinion, and it's like, you're not an expert. Your opinion isn't equal to an expert. Why are we having this discussion?
Yes. Opinions now have the weight of facts.
They're like children. I mean, it's really distressing to me. But I want to thank you for joining me this evening and for answering all of my questions about the Netanyahu speech. Let's hope that Democrats stay strong with their messaging, and that Speaker Boehner falls flat on the banana peel, that he keeps leaving these peels around. I like to picture him sort of ducking and dodging the banana peels he has all around all the various fake issues he's created. So that's it for this version of Politicus Radio. I want to thank Jason Easley for joining me tonight, and tune in next time. Thanks, y'all. Bye.